Hello and welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. Um, my guest on the show today is Kavya Sharma, an author, a poet, and a womanist. I haven't been doing this podcast for a while, but I'm excited to be back again and with my guest. So, Kavya, welcome to the podcast. How do you feel coming on the podcast? That is.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels great.
So, what have you been doing recently, and what keeps you busy?
Uh, Recently, I'm working on my fifth book actually. Finally found the inspiration to actually start working. It's been long, and I'm editing quite a few books. So,
Oh
yeah,
wow, okay.
yeah.
So what's that whole process like? Because I know you've already written you have four books under your belt already. So is it different from writing it from for the first time round? And yeah, so can you talk through that?
I mean, honestly, when you write the first book, it's coming a lot out of passion
Uh-huh.
and a lot out of like getting all those emotions out. But then once you actually know that you want to do this for the rest of your life and you want to keep coming up with your own books, you realize it's also about the technicalities. It's also about framing, structuring, narration, point of view, and all these aspects that you probably did not care much about in your first book or your second book. And yes, that's a little annoying. That's the irritant there because initially it's just about creativity and flow, but then you also have to take care of other aspects. And this is what makes the process a little difficult. Plus, the fear of, yeah, people liked my first book. What if they don't like this one? Or what if they do not like my next book? So, yeah, that pressure is always there.
So what I've heard from people who are writers, basically, they say that the first book is probably the most difficult one because it's that which is like the stumbling block, and then you get that over and done with, and then it's some sort you sort of have an idea as to how things are, and it's not as difficult as perhaps it is because you're then an outsider in the industry or something of that sort. Is that true? Or
I mean, I'd personally say, I mean, I can't say about others, but for myself, I really did create a pre-base before
Okay.
coming up with my first book. So I had an Instagram handle where I was already sharing my poetry and snippets and, short stories. And I had been published before in a few anthologies and stuff like that. So that gave me a little bit of confidence and experience that, yeah, there are a few people out there who can and will enjoy my writing. Honestly, for me, the first book was less about nervousness and more about like being excited and thrilled to be finally doing this
Yeah.
like full time. And after that, the process became more, a good mix of creative and technical. So I think I'm putting in too much of my brain and less of my heart now,
Okay.
which should not be the case. So yeah.
Okay. So you say that's definitely something for like first time writers or the writers who are publishing for the first time, that it's more that they're speaking of how people actually want it to be. It's more raw and it's not so much polished, and it's not so that it
Yes.
comes from an ivory tower or something of that sort.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, I mean, I miss that rawness. I miss like not caring that I have to take care of this aspect. And I think the more knowledge you gain, the more scared you become that you have to take care of all these aspects. So, yeah, with first book, I was unabashed. I was just completely myself. And the first book that I wrote was actually in my comfort zone, right? So, it was about love and romance, and I'm a sucker for like love poems and
Yeah.
romance and all that. I think it just flows very naturally. I'm a hopeless romantic, so it came straight off the heart. But I can't keep on doing this with every book I write. I have to experiment. I have to go out of my comfort zone. So that is where it becomes a little difficult.
So your most recent book, Struggle for Intimacy, I mean, it is along the same lines as well that you've sort of touched base on, but why is there a struggle for intimacy? I know you have branded yourself as a hopeless romantic,
Yeah.
but what was the inspiration behind writing this particular book?
Right. So honestly, all these poems in the book have been a part of my thesis paper from when I did my master's in creative writing from University of Nottingham. So my topic back then was post-colonialism, xenophobia, and fear of missing your own land, and just finding that connect of being in a foreign country, liking it, yet missing your own land, right? So all these poems are just a representation of trying to find intimacy and familiarity in a foreign land. And it has a good mix of love poems and poems on family and just not being in your own land and all that. So I mean, these poems were written 4 years before they were actually published, and
Okay.
I don't know, I just kept on reading them, rereading them, trying to edit, then re-edit, then taking them back to the same original structure. It was all actually a lot of struggle inside me to, should I be publishing them, should I not be publishing them. I think that's why I named it Struggle for Intimacy. So
Fair
yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So do you edit, or do you sort of play around with your poems so for example, you mentioned that these were poems that you'd written and then you sort of reworked on them to sort of make them published.
Yeah.
Do you sort of, like, what is the extent that you edit the poems that you've written in the past? So I remember, like, I'm a big fan of Auden, and he mentions that in his collected works, when he was sort of compiling all his poems, he said that he looked at some of his poems back in the day, and he almost cringed at them because of the way he sort of wrote.
Yeah.
But then he did one sort of thing with him, was that he didn't sort of change a lot of the poem. He simply only changed perhaps a few words here and there that he may
Yeah.
have thought is more appropriate to the times or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, how much do you change it a lot? Like, since you revisit it, or
I don't change it a lot, and I think when it comes, the first time it comes, I think it's perfect in its form. But then I don't know, as writers, we have this in us that we can make this better. Maybe it lacks something, and we have to do something. So we keep on rereading and reading and reading, and then in the end, we just end up changing a word or a
Yeah.
here and there, or a comma or a punctuation mark or something but not in its entirety. I've never completely changed a poem.
So, what would you say is, you have some advice for perhaps upcoming poets or people who are sort of looking to get into the space of
Yeah.
how they can write better? What is it that you'd recommend?
Honestly, there are two things that I tell a lot of people, because I take up a lot of creative writing batches and I teach creative writing to a lot of people. The first thing is that you cannot be good writers unless you are good readers. So please read a lot. Don't think that without reading everything is just going to come straight from the heart. You have to take inspiration. You have to see what sort of content has been out there in the market.
Yeah.
And you have to, don't ape it, but try to reach that level for what
sure.
poets have done before. Second is, don't be in that zone that you're writing for 10 days and then you're in that writer's block for the next 6 months. It does not work like that. Yeah, so I think you have to be regular if you really want to do this for the rest of your life. If you're really passionate about it, you have to be regular with this.
So that reminds me of basically. I was watching this interview of Javed Akhtar, and he says that for you to have the audacity to write one line of poetry, you should have read like 100 lines of poetry before.
Yeah.
For you to be in that basic mind space of what it's actually like
Yeah.
to actually craft a poem or something of that sort.
Yeah.
So talking about these technicalities, because I'm interested in this sort of space as well. Do you sort of discriminate when it comes to poetry or not? Like, because some people say that if people are writing in free verse, it's not really poetry. Some people are very adamant about, let's say, the verse structures or those sort of what's it called? There's a particular word for it. I'm forgetting it now. Anyway, it'll come to me.
Yeah.
There's a particular word for it. Basically, if you're writing in a particular note, it's the same thing that singers use.
Meter.
Meter. There you
Yeah,
go.
meter. Right, yeah.
If you are sticking to a particular meter or things of that sort, do you sort of look at these things if it's a new poet, or if there's someone who's basically writing?
No, I don't. I honestly don't. When my journey with poetry started, when I was really young, I was a kid. Okay. And initially, of course, it came out of a lot of, I was always an extroverted kid, and I needed better ways to express myself rather than just talking and acting and all that. So I started writing as well. And then the journey just continued, and I tried to grow with it. I tried to sort of get better at it. I have experimented with all forms of writing. I have written limericks, I have written sonnets, I have written haikus, I have done micro tales, micro stories, free verse. I think for me personally, it's all about what comes naturally. I hate sonnets. I hate attempting them. I just think they're very restricting in their approach, and I don't personally like restricting myself when it comes to content. Yeah.
But don't you think, because I've tried my hand at looking at these meters as well, don't you think if you're playing around with a particular meter or playing around with a particular sort of structure, if there is, that makes you think in a particular way? That makes you, I don't know, for example, if you start writing in that form, you might not think that you could think in that way or you could write in that manner, simply because of the constraints of that particular medium.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a very, it's a struggle between being creative unabashedly without thinking of the rules and regulations,
Yeah.
and then being creative yet keeping in mind the rules and regulations.
Right.
And it really does, I think it does hamper the creativity. That
Okay.
is when, and I read a lot about confessional poetry with Sylvia Plath and all these poets, and the previous poets were angry that why are you not following the rules? What is this poetry about personal life and all this trauma and all that stuff? But I think it's so relieving to not follow rules. It's so freeing in its own approach.
So you talked about these sort of you talked about this aspect that it almost had to be some sort of way for you to express what you were thinking. So writing just seemed very natural for you to sort of express that.
Yeah.
Like, is that simply what it does for you, or do you think that it's a different zone that you go into? So basically, a quote that comes to my mind is that I don't know what I think until I write it down. This is by John Didion.
Yeah.
So and she sort of focuses on this point really heavily. That, and I've thought about this myself, that if I've thought something through, but until and unless I don't converse it with another person,
Yeah.
I have a totally different interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Or if I write it down or something of that sort. Is
Yeah.
that another thing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, and I think as in when I grow, the whole meaning of writing changes with the transformations that I have personally gone through. It started with innocence, it started with expression, then it was more about this is what defines me, then it was all about I want to bring about a change through my writings, and then it's also a lot about I cannot think of a day when I don't want to write. It comes so naturally, and I think it's become such a huge part of my life that it's a huge thing that defines me. But most importantly, it makes me happy.
Yeah.
And if something makes me happy, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
But that's a great thing, isn't it? Because you talked about this whole aspect that you're more comfortable with certain topic areas, certain subject areas.
Yeah.
But now that you allow yourself to sort of explore, put yourself in like difficult scenarios,
Yeah.
you grow from those, and you almost see like a different side of yourself.
Yes.
Like this very self-explanatory way.
Absolutely. I mean, if I would be not experimenting, I think I'll probably just end up writing love poems for the rest of my life. And I think I have this fascination in my head that I want to write a suspense thriller and I want to write crime mysteries. And initially, I hated reading them. That's exactly why I want to experiment and start writing them and working on them.
Yeah.
But I can't just randomly switch on my laptop and start writing. For that, I have to do my own research. I have to read a lot. That is why my first novel was in my comfort zone. My second novel, which was All Seasons Alike, was way out of my comfort zone, and it did not happen as smoothly as To Nadia happened, the first book, right? With my second book, it was a lot of struggle because I had to research a lot. And even though back then it was a pain in the ass, but now coming to think of it, I gained so much out of it. And I found a completely different side of me, which is nice.
This is great. Yeah, for sure. Something that comes to my mind is that does it ever happen to you? So basically, someone told me that when Arundhati Roy was writing her book, I think God of Small Things.
Yeah.
She just started writing and finished writing. So it was one particular stretch or one particular phase that she was doing it. It wasn't like many writers have it that they sort of keep coming back to their work. If they've written some parts now, they'll sort of spend a year with it or something of that sort. Like, does that happen with you? Like you have a burst where you're simply writing for like 3 months or something? Or is it's more spaced out and you take a chill?
I mean, even if I take a chill, it's chill from that particular project and writing other stuff. Okay. Because I do both poetry and fiction. Yeah. I also do a lot of personal writing, snippet writing. I mean, I keep my options open. Yes, there have been continuous stretches where I've been writing every day of the month, but then I will take a break.
Yeah.
And then I will go back to it. And of course, going back to it is difficult. The moment you take the break, you make it difficult for yourself. Absolutely, because you lose that connect. And whenever I do go back, I read the whole thing that I've written to get back into zone. Right? I give myself 1 year to write one book. I give myself that much of time because there are also other projects that I'm working on, other types of writings that I'm working on. And I don't want to really exhaust my energy, creativity, imagination on just one project to not be able to give it to others.
But even while working on that one project, do you evolve while working on that project? So for example, you might have like a storyboard idea as to where the story goes, if you're writing fiction, that is.
Yeah.
But while writing the thing, while sort of, I don't know, developing the characters among other things, you might think that this is a totally different way that it's taking me, or totally different perspective that it's offered that I wouldn't have thought of before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, not with the first book, but with the second, I became more organized. I had structure and characters planned. And because with the first book, 10,000 words into the book, I was clueless. I did not know how to continue that further. And then I did not write for 3 months straight. I was like, I don't know how to continue this.
Yeah.
And, but with my second book, I was more organized that, okay, if I get stuck, this is what can happen, then this is what can happen, then this is what can happen. Even being so organized, I made a lot of changes while writing the book. I deviated from the path I had decided for my own self, because I discovered new things while writing the book. And that is the most beautiful part about writing.
And that's always a good thing, right? In some sense, because if you
Yeah.
find something it's more fitting to the story or something of that sort.
Yeah, and you will not get those ideas just by planning. You
Yeah.
will get those ideas in the
When you
writing
implement it,
process.
yeah. So you talked about not, for example, if you only stuck to your comfort zone and only wrote like love poetry or something of that sort for the rest of your life or something. But don't you think, how I sort of look at it is that even if there is a poetry of love or or a work of fiction that is perhaps very specific to what laymen may think a very specific field.
Yeah.
But if it's done really, really well,
Yeah.
I think it speaks to everything.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
so if you read War and Peace or if you read Anna Karenina, people may think it's a work of fiction or a work of literature, but it's not simply that.
Yeah.
If it's so well done, it speaks about everything and anything in society.
Yeah. I mean,
Do I make sense?
absolutely. And I think I'll tell you very honestly, every book I write, whether it is getting out of my comfort zone or whether it is in my comfort zone, it has a part of me. Every book that I write has a part of me, and a part of me is all about love. It's all about gush. It's all about that warmth.
Yeah.
And even though I might be writing the most grimmest and tragic books out there, I will include that warmth in that book.
Yeah.
It is so natural, and I think every writer out there has this personal element, this little space in them that is so personal to them, and they've developed it over through practice and writing and whatever they feel deeply about, that they just cannot let go of it. They cannot shed it. It will reflect in every poem, in every piece of writing that they do. It will come out.
That's really interesting. So something else that I've always wanted to ask Indian writers about is basically so when Tolstoy came out with his novel War and Peace, people were trying to categorize it as to what it is.
Yeah.
Is it a historical fiction? Is it a work of history? Is it a work of fiction or something of that sort?
Yeah.
And he simply said that that's a very sort of Anglican way of looking at like books or looking at literature.
Yeah.
Because coming from his Russian background, they have a totally different perspective as how they consume literature or how they consume books.
Yeah.
So he simply put it as Tolstoyan prose. This is my way of writing it, because in the Russian style of how things were, you can include historical stuff and you can include like a work of literature in it as well, but it's all simply one work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Indian context, when people talk about the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, there's modern day people try to look at the historicity of those events and things like that.
Yeah.
But what's more important, and I've heard some of the scholars talk about it, that because India has always been such a spiritual sort of country and a spiritual tradition, the motive has never been to sort of establish the historicity of these events or the historicity of these stories. It's always been to evoke a very spiritual essence in the readers when you're sort of reading it.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if Ravana had 10 heads or something of that sort. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So do you think that's something you'd want to explore, or you have explored already in your writing, that you'd want to touch? Obviously, you talked about wanted to come back to India and write works in India because you feel more connected here and things like that.
Yeah.
But exploring this side of things, of how perhaps Indian literature was in its essence.
I mean, if you ask me nowadays, mythology and mythological fiction is at an all-time boom.
Exactly.
People want to read Devdutt Patnaik.
Yeah.
People want to read stuff on what Shakuni thought in Mahabharat, what Draupadi's side of Mahabharat, Arjuna's side of Mahabharat. There are also a lot of shows coming on Netflix.
Or serials, like
Yes.
these are
And yes, we do connect at it because we are trying to find a more stronger spiritual connect. And I wouldn't call this religious. I would call this a spiritual connect.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, in future, maybe yes, we do require a lot of research and study to write on these topics. So I can't just say like a lay person can write about it.
But even for sure, that is the case. But if you look at these stories, Valmiki's Ramayana to Tulsidas's Ramayana are completely polar opposites.
Yes.
But most of India consumes Tulsidas's Ramayana, and they sort of prescribe that as the original in some sense.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that even if there is an upcoming writer and they write their Ramayana, let's say set in modern times, living in a metro city or whatever the case is, that could well be a part of the numerous other Ramayanas that are there, because there's a feminist approach to Ramayana. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Absolutely. And I think what people do take away is probably not the characters or probably not the old story, but the lessons that the old story taught, right? Like the values, the lessons and all those aspects. And presenting them in the modern format. For example, I'm not sure if you've read Devdutt Patnaik's Modern Gita.
I haven't.
Yes. So he came up with the Modern Gita. That's a modern version of Gita, and I read it, and a lot of people trashed it out and were like not really happy about it. But then for me, I thought it was such a unique way of coming up with lessons and values and what Krishna taught and what Arjuna listened and what was the ultimate aim.
Yeah.
I think even if we don't take real life historical characters or mythological characters and we try to bring across these values through fictional characters in different parts of the book, these are again strong values. I think every reader, when they read books, they want to take away something from it, whether it's feeling loved, whether it's, oh, I relate to this, whether, oh, I've been through this, whether, oh, that's so tragic, some strong emotion that they connect with or something that they learn and they want to take away from it. So, what I really work on in my books is all about themes. What is the message that I want to convey? For example, in All Seasons Alike, it was the whole idea of acceptance, when there comes a stage in life wherein you've tried everything and nothing is working your way. What do you do then? You accept. You accept your situation. That's the first basic step that you do. And the whole book is about acceptance there.
That's really interesting. Something else I wanted to touch base on. So you're basically founder and editor in chief of Verse of Silence as well.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about that particular project of yours and what your endeavor with it is?
Yeah. So Verse of Silence, honestly, it started as a blog for me. So I was blogging poetry and stuff, and the name of my blog was Verse of Silence.
Oh wow.
And when I studied in UK, that's when I got to know about the concept of literary magazines. Before that, I absolutely had no idea that people could actually submit like single pieces of poetry and short stories. I thought you just have to get the whole collection published or write a whole book to get published. And I thought this is such a great idea. Like you can write a single piece of poetry and still get it published, right? Or story or whatever. And I submitted my work to a lot of literary magazines in UK. It was then that I decided that I wanted to convert this into a literary magazine. So we came up earlier when we started, and this was like 4.5 years back, we came up with monthly issues that got a little taxing because I wanted to do a lot of other things. So we converted it into a quarterly magazine, and we publish short stories, poems, artworks, illustrations, and literary book reviews. And apart from that, we do creative writing workshops on poetry, short stories, and stuff. And we do a lot of poetry short fiction contests. Before COVID, we also did offline poetry reading events. I think we're going to go back to it again. But we shifted to online poetry reading events as well. So I think I just wanted to provide, the whole intention for me personally was to provide an unbiased creative platform to writers across India, like a platform they could really trust their writings with. And I was surprised the first time we launched. With the first issue, we received only 20 submissions. And now we receive close to 200, 300 submissions for per quarter. And it's really like I have a very strong team of editors and magazine designer and social media handlers, and it's been a great journey.
That's really interesting. I wanted to ask you, so what's this whole process like? Because as compared to writing books where you're sort of very alone and you're in your zone and you're sort of working on this one particular project on your own.
Yeah.
As compared to this, which is more collaborative, where you're sort of getting ideas from all across the board. And you said you have like workshops and stuff, which is more interactive as well.
Yeah.
So how's that like this more collaborative version of literature, more collaborative version of producing content?
Yeah. I think while writing books, you're brainstorming alone. But when you're doing something like this, you have a whole team of people, and you might be thinking from one perspective and being like, oh, this is such a great idea. But there'll be 3-4 other people who will be like, we have better ideas. So I think it's all about also inclusivity of other creative energies along with you and coming to a common term where we can think of an excellent idea with the creative merging of 3 to 4 people. And I think that's what makes it better, because when you're working alone, you're your own judge. You're like, okay, I don't know, I think this is great, let me just do it. But with 4-5 people in the team, good creative mix of energies and better ideas to work on, I think you're really pumped up. And yes, the communication is more, the interaction is more, the brainstorming is more, the effort is more. But at the end of the day, and I mean, all my team members, they're working in really good companies. One of them is in Singapore. One of them is working for Amazon. And I'm like, why do you really want to stick around? You're working for Amazon. And like, this is something I'm not going to leave. I mean, this is for my soul, actually. So, yeah.
So has there been, so you talked about this essence that there are people working in the corporate space or something else and they sort of submit or they're sort of working with you.
Yeah.
Like, has there been a point where you read a work from them, like a poem or a short story or something of that sort, and you say, wow, maybe you could make it as like a, or maybe you should devote more time to your creative side?
Yeah, of course. I mean, see, the best part about writing is you can be an engineer, a doctor, anyone out there in the world, and you can still be a writer.
And sometimes it helps that way.
Yeah.
So
More
like,
experience, more exposure, more, I don't know, like just being more out there. I think as writers, we are so recluse.
yeah.
When COVID came, I felt all my, like, because I used to travel a lot, and by traveling I don't mean spending like a lot of money on traveling, even just going out for a walk alone and
Mhm.
like traveling to cheaper places, cheaper locations at like affordable prices, and that gives you that vibe and energy to write. That gives you that you observe things, you notice people, and ideas come to you.
Hmm.
Right? With COVID, it got hampered a lot. Right? So I think when you're in certain fields and you're out there in the world and you're meeting people every day and interacting with them, I'm sure you have good ideas in your head to like convert them into content. So yes.
So I'm forgetting the name. So I just recently read his book, The Old Man and the Sea. It's very famous. I don't know if you've heard of his name.
I'm also
You get what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So he basically was he lived a very sort of, he was very I think he lived in Cuba for a while as well. The writer I'm talking about, and he was very sort of, his day to day work was, I think, in construction or something of that sort. So very different from a writing life.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think he mentioned that that's perhaps what's more effective if you want to be a writer. Because if you want to be a writer and you're working in some sort of creative landscape, then maybe your creative energies are sort of being used in that particular endeavor. So
Yeah.
when you come back to write, it's very similar as to the experiences you may have
Yeah.
or the things you're writing about. But something if that's very different to what you're doing, maybe if you're a carpenter or working in construction, which people wouldn't equate to basically being a writer,
Yeah.
maybe that allows you to sort of then come back to your writing desk and then talk about those experiences or talk about those things.
Yes. I mean, honestly, there was this phase in my life where I thought I want to be a full-time writer. And that would mean, and I've created a very beautiful space, working space for myself, because I've been freelancing for past 5 years. I've
Yeah.
been working from home for the past 5 years now. So I'm stuck at that, my table, my bookshelf, and my,
Yeah.
all the elements I've tried to make it aesthetic looking, right? And there was this time, as I said, when I thought that let me be a full-time writer, I'm going to write on books, because when I'm working on other things, I hardly get the time to actually work on my own books. It was so difficult for me to come and actually write now. But then I thought, and I tried for some bit, and I thought I was really restricting myself in terms of space and just like being out there, because yes, you can do it. Yes, you can read a lot of books in that room, write a lot of books in that room, but there will come a point and time when you're just exhausted, when you just want to let loose and go out. Right? That is, and then came this
Go
idea
out for a
that
walk and come back and write again.
yeah. So, and then came this idea that, why do I have to restrict myself in the creative field by just being a writer? I can edit books. I love reading. I can read and commission books. I can do proofreading. I can teach creative writing because I've studied and I've
Yeah.
learned. So this aspect of creative field keeps me pumped up and flowy and all that, in that zone, because when I have to teach, I have to read a lot. I
For
have
sure.
to create study material. I have to work on my art. That in return helps me in my solace when I'm writing my books. So I think it has to be a good mix, actually, for me personally.
For sure. What is that process like? For example, you talk about editing books as well. Like, how is that different? So, for example, when you're actually crafting it for yourself, so you're writing on your own,
Yeah.
and then maybe you send it to so if you work with publishing houses, so they have a set of editors and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But if you're editing yourself for someone else, that is,
Yeah.
like how, I don't know, how strict are you? Like, what's your way? Like, do you give a lot of leeway? Or how is editing in general? Because yeah.
I mean, editing in general depends on whether you're just looking for proofreading. If you're looking for proofreading, it's all about checking the grammar, punctuation,
yeah.
spelling mistakes, language, and all that. But if you really want in-depth editing, then it's all about narrative voice, point of view, setting, characters, growth. Is the storyline actually going in the wrong direction? Is the beginning impactful enough? Is the ending great enough? And taking care of these aspects. And I'll be very honest, because I've been an editor and I'm a writer myself. Writers are stubborn. They've written something, they don't want to
Yeah.
change it. And I am that writer as well. But as an editor, I know the importance of reading someone's work from a third person's point of view. Right? When you're writing your own work, you're reading it from the same perspective you've written it. You really do not have a new perspective to it. That is why we require editors. We don't value editors. We're like, oh, we know how to check grammar and punctuation, we'll do it on our own. But you don't realize that person is experienced in reading a lot of work, has read a variety of work, and knows what to change, when to change, where to change. You have to believe in that power. As in, I wouldn't say I'm a very strict editor. I don't take away the voice of the author or the main storyline. I don't try to change it. But yes, I notice a pattern that Indian writers don't really focus on character growth and plot growth much. It's very stagnant in times. That is something that I really like working on.
Right. But how difficult is that? But do you always have this inkling as to no, this is the way it should be, or something of that sort? Like, or do you stop yourself? Like, how is that? Or is it subconsciously always going to be there, even when you are editing?
Yeah.
However much you may try to sort of not sort of hide the voice of the author.
Yeah.
Simply because of you having access to this work and you working on that work,
Yeah.
will perhaps give an element of yourself.
Yeah.
To that
I mean, I'm not sure. I try to do it so stealthily that it should not come
Right.
across as someone else has also worked on it.
Mhm.
It should solely be the author's work and author's interpretation of
Yeah.
it. So see, when you're reading someone's work, my editing process is, the first thing that I do is I don't start editing straight across. I read the whole book first, and by reading it, it makes me understand the voice of the author. Like, how is the author presenting different emotions? What are the actions and reactions like? Right? And then I try to imbibe that in the editing process that I take. So yeah.
And this work that's coming to you, it's already edited a billion times already by the author.
Yes.
Right? Because
Yes.
I think I heard
Yeah, but
this
some
phrase-
people, they don't even touch their books,
Oh,
and,
wow.
and you will find like 1,000 spelling mistakes and punctuation mistakes, and those are the ones that are really irritating to work on. Yeah.
Because I've heard that all good writing is simply editing or something of that sort.
Yeah. I think if you see, there are two types of writers, but that's my personal definition. Writers who underwrite, writers who overwrite.
Okay.
Right? These are the two writers you have to deal with. People who underwrite are so rushed in their writing style, they don't elongate and elaborate on ideas that actually needs elaboration.
Right.
And people who overwrite they end up actually repeating the same things over and over again. So in that, you have to chatify a lot. You have to like cut out a lot of aspects. I've received manuscripts wherein, and from publishing houses where there have been, oh, this is like a 90,000 words manuscript, and we want you to bring it down to 40,000. Imagine. And just listening, like just reading that mail scares me, and I'm like, what? My biggest scare is, what if this manuscript is so good and I don't feel like cutting
Oh,
so
right.
much stuff out
Yeah.
of it? Yeah, because it's just a mail. It needs to be done because it's
Hmm.
cost effective and all that. We
Exactly,
have to
yeah.
take care of these aspects as well.
But sometimes, and I don't know, I'm not playing devil's advocate or something, but sometimes don't you think that maybe when we try to categorize people as like underwriting or overwriting,
Yeah.
perhaps we aren't getting to the essence of what it is? Because so my favorite writer is Dostoevsky, and many of his translators in the earlier days used to sort of not understand why he's perhaps added a certain element in the story,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
would cut it out or they would remove it,
Yeah.
saying that there's no point to it. But then the later
Yeah.
translators, they started understanding that no, it all makes sense in the bigger landscape of things,
Yeah.
or maybe it's simply there for the poetry of it all, for like the magic of it all, of how a Dostoevsky's story is.
Yeah.
So sometimes, don't you think that if there are things that are underrepresented or overwritten about,
Yeah.
they may have like an essence to it?
Yeah,
All-
I mean, of course, they may firstly high five because Dostoevsky is my favorite
Oh,
author.
wow.
I absolutely love Crime and Punishment.
Oh, that's
I
my
don't know-
favorite book as well,
I
yeah.
don't know how many times I've read it. But yeah, coming to your question, see, yes, in retrospect, if you think of it, maybe if those authors become like this famous and you go
And become
back and
Dostoevsky.
and you go back and interpret their work, you'll be like, oh wow, this made sense. Why would an editor remove that?
Yeah.
But editing and publishing books is a lot dependent on the times that you're living in. The times, because a writer is thinking from a writer's perspective. Honestly, an editor is only thinking from an editing perspective, but the publisher
Hmm.
is thinking from the perspective of what's gonna sell, what is cost effective,
Yeah.
how much can we like bear. Is this person even going to sell 10 copies? Like, this is their worry. You put in money in an author, and then
sure.
you get to know that this person is not even selling this much.
Yeah.
Right? It's so much loss, so much money involved, right? So publishers have to see all those aspects, and that's the kind of pressure they put on the editor
Hmm.
to cut out words or to add more words, and we have to take that into consideration. The current times that we are living in, it's not about very longish books. nobody has that time and patience. There's a very limited audience for that.
Hmm.
The audience nowadays is for like Chetan Bhagat sort of books. You have to be short, crisp, going, and like just like on the go. Like you can
Yeah.
read the book in 3 days and it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So-
But and I think I don't know, I don't have experience in this particular industry, but I've heard sort of conversations about this.
Yeah.
But in India, the Indian fiction market isn't that big as well. So many times when it comes to projects such as it has to be like extremely good
yeah.
for you to then publish like as an Indian writer,
Yeah.
a fiction like a fiction.
See, nowadays we have like all sorts of publishing options available, so a lot of people can get published easily. You get paid. You can do like a mix of there's vanity publishing, there is traditional publishing, and then there is paid publishing, and then
Right.
there is self publishing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, do we all have the opportunity to get published? Yes. But do we all have the opportunity to get published from good publishing houses? And by good, I don't just mean the top notch like Penguin and Hachette and all these.
Mhm.
There are indie publishing houses which are really good.
Yeah.
And these are the ones who are very selective with their manuscripts.
With what they put out. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were having this conversation before we started off, but can you talk a little bit about the whole publishing space that is? Because for an aspiring man of letters, as I am as well,
Yeah.
what is it like for someone who's wanted to get in the market and wants to understand the whole publishing space where it comes to these big publishing houses,
Yeah.
but also perhaps someone who may want to take the self-publishing route sometime down?
So do you publishing in terms of getting published or
Yeah,
working
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
industry? Okay.
No, getting published for
Getting
sure as a
published,
writer.
alright.
Yeah.
So honestly, when it comes to big publishing houses, they don't usually accept unsolicited manuscripts. They only take up manuscripts that are coming through agents.
Hmm.
Right? So literary agents,
Yeah,
right? And we have quite a few in India. I mean, initially there were only 2-3, but now a lot of people have
Have
come up
come
as
up, yeah.
literary agents, right? And there are proper agencies. There is Siahi and Purple Agency and all those. So Purple Folio, if I'm not wrong. And there are a lot of others. And the big publishing houses, they have this list of agents mostly who give manuscripts, and then they usually sign authors for a 3-book, 4-book, 2-book deal, right?
Oh,
It
yeah,
usually
yeah.
like that. That does not mean that they don't accept random authors coming their way. They do sometimes, but it's a very thin chance to
Hmm.
get noticed with big publishing houses, right? And then comes the publishing houses which are indie, which come below the
Mhm.
top notch, and maybe they're not that famous because they're not that much into marketing and see, when it comes to Penguin, you will see that they're publishing Twinkle Khanna and all these big names and all that. And then comes the second category, which probably not be publishing big names, but they're publishing good books and
Yeah.
good authors.
Is that the category Rupa would be in, or Rupa would be in the top?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Rupa is, I mean, to each its own. I don't
Yeah.
know. If I have to put it, I'll put it in the second category. But
Yeah.
to some people, it can be like a
Top
top-notch
category,
publishing house. Yes. I'm no one to decide that. Right? So yes, when it comes to these publishing houses, usually all these publishing houses have a proper website and the submissions guideline.
Hmm.
They even mention the font size they want
Oh,
you
wow,
to submit
okay.
the synopsis in, and the spacing and all that. They will mention the word limit that you have to usually it's 3 sample chapters and a synopsis that has to be either a short synopsis within 500 words or a longish synopsis within 1,000-1,500 words. Synopsis is basically the summary of your
Hmm.
whole book, including all the suspenses and everything. Some of the publishing houses will also ask for a cover letter. That some of them will also ask for your author bio. What have you done in the field already? Any publications before and anything. Some of them will also ask for comparative titles. Who are your contemporary authors
Oh, right,
nowadays? What are
okay.
the books and why do you think you're better than them
Huh.
and all that? Some of them will also ask for a market analysis. Like, if we do publish your book, how do you choose to market it? Because
Hmm.
you can be an amazing writer, you can write the best book out there, but if you're not marketing it, if you're not reaching out to enough people, it's not going to sell.
Hmm.
I write a book. I am nowhere on any social media handle. How is anyone ever going to know
For
I've
sure.
written a book?
Yeah.
Why will anyone buy my book? What is my credibility? Right?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
So that reminds me. So I was listening to this podcast. It's one of the most famous podcasts in India. I really like it. It's called the Seen and the Unseen by Amit Verma.
Okay.
And he had this. He had a guest who was working in this particular space, the publishing space.
Yeah.
And she remembered basically the first, and she basically quoted the same thing, that you could be the best of the writers, but if you don't understand, let's say, marketing, or if you
Yeah.
can't market your book,
Yeah.
then it's very unlikely that it'll do really well.
Yeah.
So she was really shocked because most of the writers she came in, they said that, "Acha, we've written this manuscript. Now you market it the way
Yeah,
you want
we are
to."
done with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it was really surprising for her when she first met Chetan Bhagat.
Yeah.
So when Chetan Bhagat walked in, he came in with a presentation as to how
Plan.
my book should be marketed in
Yes.
Chennai, in South, in the North, this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
And she was really taken back because she didn't expect that from the writers. The writer was always like a very sort of sit back approach and
Yeah.
let the sort of agency do the work.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of Chetan Bhagat myself, but he understands the whole ecosystem of how to market your books.
Yes. Yes.
So that's another thing.
And I think honestly in today's times it is important.
For sure.
You see so many people, there are so many poets, Instagram handles, people writing stories, they've come up with reels and music and whatnot. It's such a creative space to be in.
Yeah.
Like how do people get to know you among all these people who are so creative out there? See, they are trying to make their mark by working on themselves. So you have to do the same. You have to learn to market. You have to go to the book reviewers. You have to get those Amazon reviews. You have to share it on your Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those social media handles.
Yeah.
You have to invest money with your PR if you have that kind of money. I mean, there are levels of marketing. You can start with the most basic level and then go on and spend as much. I've heard so many authors and spend 10 lakh rupees,
wow.
5 lakh rupees on marketing their books.
But I don't know, maybe do you think there's still a room for the idealist in me who thinks that if you simply focus on your art, then the results will show? Like if it's that good a book, but if it's that good a piece of art.
As I said, I mean, but who knows that idealist, right? You can be an idealist, but who knows you? Why should people buy your book? See, this part I agree with. You need to make your readers trust you. You need to make them believe that you write well, they can relate. And how do you make them relate? By being available to them in some way. I share my poetry on Instagram. I don't do it every day. I do it maybe once a week, twice a week. That's good enough to keep my audience engaged so that they know that, okay, this person writes, we enjoy. If she comes up with a book, we will buy it.
Yeah.
Right? But if I don't write, they'll be my friends, family, 20, 30 people, it's done. Who else, right?
Right. That makes sense. But also, so we were talking also about the self-publishing route because could you talk a little bit about that? Have you seen writers who've gone the self-publishing route and made it and been successful?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't names because they're under contract, but I'll give you an example. I know this person, very famous. Now, can't really name the person, but he self-published his poetry book. And he was very good at it, and he kept on promoting it for 1 year. It came out on Kindle, and he sold it at a very cheap price, like 70 rupees, 80 rupees, 100 rupees at max, right? So in self-publishing, you have to take care of everything. You have to design your own cover, you have to do your own editing, you have to typeset your own thing, you have to upload your book, and then you have to market your own book on your own. It's just you. And if you have friends to help you around, good, right? He marketed his book for 1 year and everything, and it sold, and he was active on Insta and everywhere. He did book reviews, he came live and engaged with his audience and kept on doing it for 1.5 years. And then a big publishing house noticed him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they said that we are going to republish your book in print, and we are also offering you a 3-book deal.
Oh.
And now he's good. He's been paid like a good signing amount for that, and he's become super famous.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you never know who might notice you. You just I mean, I'll tell you very honestly, when I started my Instagram, I just had 500 followers or something. Now I have close to 12,200 followers, right? The TTT had come very recently, Terribly Tiny Tales, if you're aware. Okay, so Terribly Tiny Tales is this really great platform for writers, and they sort of come up with reels and stories and poems and snippets, and they publish. They're Bombay based, and to be a select writer in their organization, you had to go through a form and complete write-up. I tried, never got a reply back, but a few months later, they approached me on my Instagram saying that we really like your writing and we would love for you to be our select writer with us.
Oh, wow.
So you never know who might notice you, right? And when. You have to be out there. I never thought when I started my Instagram that UCB or all these big brands, even Sugar and all these people will be approaching me for brand promotions and noticing my content and would want me to write content for them. You just have to keep working hard. You just have to be dedicated. You have to work on your creativity and you have to be out there. That's important.
But that's a good thing about the whole landscape of social media now, right? It's sort of democratized this aspect that it doesn't now have to be the fact that you have to go to the big publishing houses to sort of make your cut, or in any other format that is.
Yeah.
You can sort of keep working at it, be it through different ways, through different mediums, that is, through
Yeah.
Instagram, through Twitter, whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually there will be some sort of thing that you can do in the creative space. It's not that you sort of have to go to Bombay or you have to go to certain places to
Yeah.
make your trade.
Absolutely. I mean, see, when I was done with my education, I was like, okay, I wanted to work in a publishing house. I got a job in Bombay. I got a job in Bangalore, and then I thought, I tried also working in Gurgaon for a few agencies, and then I thought that, okay, I want to write my own books at the same time,
Yeah.
and work also and earn money. I mean, surviving just on royalties you're not Chetan. Not every second person is Chetan Bhagat. That's not good enough to survive.
Yeah.
You need money, right? So for that you need to work. And then freelancing came as an idea to me. Like, I can work
Mhm.
from home, at the same time I have enough time to work on my own projects. And I think it's in the end it's all about striking that right balance. That whatever works your way.
And also many of these, or if you are a really good writer, maybe your story gets picked up by one of these web series and you get paid like a
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah. I mean, I was also informed that one of my novels, they are pitching for some OTT platform
wow.
and stuff. Yeah. I've been waiting for like over a year now.
But does that make you excited or also a lot, maybe anxious at the same time, because you're like, this is my baby, this is my story. How will they change it? Will I get
Uh,
say in it or something of that sort? Or you're like, it's fine.
I mean, the anxious part probably will come when they try to change the story and try to
Right.
bring in their own elements. Then maybe I'll be like, okay, it's losing out the me
yeah,
that the book
yeah.
has. But I haven't reached that stage to understand the anxiousness.
Yeah.
Just knowing that maybe some OTT platform might take up your book is exciting.
Exactly.
obviously.
Yeah.
That is exciting.
For sure.
For sure.
But even though maybe looking from the outside as well as consumers, when we see sort of great books be converted into films or be converted into shows,
Yeah.
I know there's always aspects that you lose out on.
Yeah.
So maybe just from that particular aspect, you may think that if it ever happens with you, if it ever happens with someone else,
Yeah.
unless you get like a director who's like, what's it called, like really in tune with you and really in
Yeah.
tune with your particular book and your
Really
philosophy.
good at presenting what you've written.
Yeah. Like I remember, I'm forgetting the film now, but this so basically Satyajit Ray made a film on one of his close friends,
Okay.
and he took him to the cinema to watch to show it.
Hmm.
And his close friend, after the film was done, his close friend told him that this is not me, this is not my life, this is not your life, this is my movie. So,
Yeah.
so that's what it is. So I guess you have to give that creative license in some sense for them to then go on and explore and take it
Yes.
their way.
The creative license is also given to the publishers, right?
Yeah.
Because they have the freedom to cut it out, cut it short,
Right. Yeah.
elongate it. So you get used to that. When you're writing stuff, usually you're very raw with it. Of course, taking care, as in when you grow with experience, taking care of the technicalities, and you think you've written okay enough, good
Mhm.
enough. But then the publisher has something else in mind. They have some other perception, and then if it eventually goes into an OTT platform or into a web series, they have some other perception. So I think you have to learn to give that creative license to other people if you want to sort of make it big.
Yeah. So talking about that, because I know now people have started like many of the institutions have started monitoring people's use of the internet, like YouTube and the OTT platforms as well.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to really talk about some topics that if people are very politically driven to talk about those in, let's say, a video format on OTT or something of that sort.
Yeah.
Has that crept into the publishing industry as well? Like, do people sort of have that when you're writing a book?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
They yes, some of the publishing houses will restrict you, that some of them even openly mention on their websites and stuff, we do not accept manuscripts which are sexually explicit
Okay.
or politically inclined or on certain topics and stuff like that. And some of the publishing houses are brave.
Yeah.
They want to write and come up with books with only those topics which are controversial because they want those topics to be heard.
talked about, yeah.
So some publishing houses choose to be safe, some choose to be brave. Yes, there are publishing houses who will reject certain ideas because they're scared or
Yeah.
they just don't want to come up with.
So
such
we
books.
were talking about this whole aspect before as well. We started our conversation that even when working with publishing houses, even if you are working as a fiction writer, there are still restraints. Like, what are those restraints about? Like, there's some sort of infringements on your creative license. So how would they look like?
In terms of, see, if you're in a really hardbound contract with publishers, and then they will actually also tell you that this is the story we want you to write. We want you to write this in 2 to 3 months and just get it done with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so these are also the restrictions. But then if you're not in a very hardbound contract, if you have a very good rapport with your publishing house and your publicist and all these people, and then they will give you the freedom to, hey, like try to just write it in 6 months and get it done with, and we love your ideas, so do whatever it takes. They will maybe mention a few themes that, okay, try to include a bit of these themes in the books because they are good in the market right now.
Right.
You have to take care of what's working in the market right
For
now.
sure, yeah.
Like, what is the public, what sort of books is the public are the public buying?
Mhm.
That's important, right?
So another thing that comes to I've heard this from fellow writers as well, and they say that for example, they've handed in their sort of manuscript, and and it's also a finished product.
Yeah.
Sometimes these publishing houses wouldn't put it out for like a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's just sitting on the back shelf. And
Slush
then
pile.
yeah.
What they usually do is they put it in a slush pile. It's called a slush pile.
Okay.
And probably these are the manuscripts that they think might work in the future if they don't have enough good manuscripts.
Oh, right.
They won't
okay.
publish them now, but they want to save them for maybe in the future. That's also a maybe. It's not, there's no guarantee that it will be published. And yes, if you're lucky enough, they might come back a year or 2 or 3 years later. They'll be like, oh, we still have your manuscript. But by then, authors have lost their patience. They'll be like, we got it published.
Right, yeah. Or they'll forget about it as well if they've got it published.
I have gotten that 5 years back.
Damn.
5 years after the book was published and every time the poem was published, they were like, hey, we would like to publish that. I'm like, it's been 5 years now.
I've heard really sort of hilarious things as well. That, for example, if the book or the thing talks about something that's very sort of invested in the times that we're living in right now, for example, COVID or something,
Yeah.
and it comes out 3 years later or 5 years later, then, and COVID is a major thing about the story, but
Right.
now it's all gone and done with. So, like, what's the point of even putting it out?
Yeah,
It was relevant
relevance.
in that particular time.
Yes.
If it's a non-fiction or whatever it is.
Yes. So relevance matters, of
Yeah.
course. People would not want to read about COVID. I don't think a lot of people came up with COVID books. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
also edited books on COVID. And yes, I mean, relevance to time is important.
For sure.
There are certain times when certain types of books, emotions, work, themes, they work better
Mhm.
than the others. And who are you writing for in the end,
Hmm.
right? You're writing for the public, but that does not mean that you base your writings on public's opinion.
Hmm.
Do your own thing, but at the same time, it has to be a good mix of your own creativity and what the public wants.
Yeah, that's so. I was having this conversation. The studio was sitting in basically the people who are working here as well.
Yeah.
So the people outside as well. I was speaking with them, and one of the person over there has been really working for a long time to basically get his music known and things like that. And we
Yeah.
were having a conversation about this. Whereas I felt that through the democratization process of social media and other sort of these industries,
Yeah.
sure, it's promoted a lot of sort of trash which would have never come out before.
Yeah.
But it's still given that voice to that particular person who doesn't have to take the sort of the conventional route, and he can still put
Yeah.
his work out there. So
Yeah.
you can, that's still there, but the person over there was still of the other opinion that no, perhaps it's
I'll
still
tell
better
you
off.
what the scary part is. The scary part is to actually get noticed eventually. How much of free work are you putting across to people, right? Because this is your art, this is your creativity. You want to be paid for it, you want to be known for it. You don't want to give it everything away for free.
Yeah.
I've shared, sometimes I feel like I've shared the best poems of my life for free on Instagram.
Yeah.
Right? I could have written books, but then to people to recognize me, to be able to buy my books, I had to get that content out for free.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think everything has its own pros and cons.
Yeah.
Maybe once you reach a stage, maybe now once I've reached a stage, I can keep certain poems or stories to myself and think that I will only get them out as books so that I get paid for them. But yes, a lot of free content is scary as well. How much free content till you get recognized, right?
Right. Yeah, that's also a thing with comedians, isn't it? Like, comedians are often very sort of skeptical with their shows or their recordings of their shows if
Yeah.
people put them out.
Comedians, musicians, singers,
Anyone, actually. Yeah.
artists, everyone. I have all these sorts of people on my Instagram, and I know how tough it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can understand, because if someone's been working for it for a year, and in terms of a comedian, it's just a 1 hour set.
Yeah.
And that's an hour. People may think it's just an hour, but it's an hour worth like a year's work of
Yeah.
effort or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. Both of us are avid readers, as you've said, and our favorite writer is Dostoevsky, so which I'm pretty happy to hear about.
Yeah.
Are there some other favorite writers of yours, other favorite books that you'd like us to, which you'd like to recommend to the people who are listening in, watching
Yeah.
us?
I'm gonna mention a few authors that I really like reading. Like in terms of poetry, Kamla Das is someone that I absolutely love reading. Her collection of poems, and Summer in Calcutta, and all these. And Meena Kandaswamy is one poet I absolutely love reading. I love her aggression and speed and rawness in the poems that she
And
writes. So
activism and
yeah, so very recently I read Miss Militancy, which was published very long back, but I got to read it now. So these are the two poets that I really enjoy reading. Sylvia Plath is obviously amazing. I love Emily Dickinson and yeah, all these poets. In terms of authors, Dostoevsky for sure. Who else do I like? It's been long I've read, because see, a lot of my job is actually to read new fresh authors and their works and to edit them. So it's been a long time I've actually read a famous person's book.
Okay.
Yeah. I do like Paulo Coelho quite a lot.
Right.
His books are nice in terms of the modern times that we live in. But yes, I read a lot of new authors
Right.
who write amazingly well. And every time I edit their books, I do slide in their emails and tell them that please market this well. I want this to reach out to enough people. I'm not exactly remembering the name of the book. I think The Boat or The Boathouse something. It was written by a very first time author, South Indian.
Mhm.
Such a beautiful story. Such a beautiful story. I edited it. She was a first time author. That's one of my favorite recent novels.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So, is it more fiction? Obviously, because of your work, is it more fiction that you read, or you read non-fiction too?
I don't like reading nonfiction,
Okay.
honestly. I've gotten a lot of opportunities as a ghostwriter to write nonfiction books.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and they do pay you well.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, yeah, I like reading fiction more.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Why is it? So you talked about some of these writers that you do like reading. Why is it that you like reading them or like reading their work? What is it about them or their work that resonates with you as compared to others? Like,
I think, yeah, I don't know about other readers, but for me, it's mostly about if I find some level of connect, if I find some level of relatability in that content, even though if it's fiction, that is what, even if it feels, despite being fiction, even if it feels real, like, yeah, this is true and this happens and this is there and it's so nice. And beauty of it. With poetry, it's not just about content and how it reads and stuff like that. Poetry should feel beautiful.
Yeah.
It should feel soft, like it should give you that sensation, some sensation. I don't know how to define it, just some sensation. With poetry, it's mostly that. With other sort of content, it's about relatability, and I resonate with it and I feel a connect with it. That's important.
and that's what the most important thing is when people say what's the point of fiction and this kind of stuff. They fail to recognize that sure, like non-fiction sells a lot and it sells probably more than fiction does.
Yeah.
But if it's a great work of fiction, it becomes more than real in some sense.
Yeah.
When you talk about like the Ramayana or
Absolutely.
War and Peace or something like these texts.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
For example, as we said, Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment
Yeah.
being a favorite. I honestly feel I know Raskolnikov as
Yeah.
as the protagonist. I feel
He's
he
like me,
exists.
yeah.
I feel he's real, right?
Exactly.
I want to believe that he is real.
Yeah.
And when you write such good fiction books, which are actually reflecting real life values, but through fiction,
Exactly.
you're actually creating characters that those are among you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that character can be you as well.
And that's what it is. So, and that's like the major distinction between Freud and Jung. When Freud said that it's all very biological, that things come to us and those kind of things, but Jung said no, it's more about the mythological basis that we've been brought up on.
Yeah.
That you could become Arjuna or you could become like a Raskolnikov.
Yeah.
The things that you've been brought up on, and you will feel that in elements that you're taking a walk down the park and and those sort of things resonates with you a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it is.
In the end, it's all about that. I that's what I say. When people are reading books, they're not reading for the fun of it. They're reading to find something out of it that they can take away, right? And even if it's a line or a word or a chapter or a character that they remember, you've done your job.
Exactly.
You've
Yeah.
done your job. Yeah.
And that's with anything in the world actually. Like when people say that like one of the things I really encourage in the political environment that we do live in is at least have conversations with people who may be perhaps different from your political outlook or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But just from a conversation, even if you think it's almost a lost battle, it'll never happen, but
Yeah.
even if you leave a thought in their head, that's enough, because I'll leave them to go back and think about perhaps
it,
their
yeah.
stands, perhaps how they look at the world.
Absolutely.
And that's the least you can, that's like, yeah, that's what you can do
I think that is why dialogue is so important.
for sure.
And I think to be able to, because dialogues is one aspect of novel writing that comes very difficult for me, right? It's not easy to write dialogues, but I think things that you actually want to do, when you practice, you get better at them. So if you actually dialogue in real life, you'll be able to write them better. I'm being
I guess.
very honest.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's not good with dialogue and exchange of content and everything in terms of speaking and everything in real life, it'll be even more difficult for you to write.
Right. Have you so you said it's difficult for you, but have you considered that? Because like going into the screenwriting process and maybe working in Bollywood.
Uh,
Because now with this upsurge, because it's not only Bollywood, right? It's the OTT platforms.
Yes,
It's
yes.
YouTube. There's a big sort of big market on YouTube as well when they with creating like 20, 30-minute videos,
yes.
which are like,
For short film, yes. I think I have written a short film.
oh, okay.
And I used to work with NDTV Good Times as an intern. So I wrote a love show there. I don't know if it's there. It was for their app long time back. I think 4-5 years back.
Okay.
Right when I was in my college undergrad actually.
Mhm.
And I have thought of screenwriting, script writing, not for Bollywood, but ever since OTT and all these, it has
Yeah.
made a little easier,
For
a little
sure.
more accessible.
Yeah.
So now, yes, I can think about it. But for Bollywood, never. That thought never crossed my mind.
But that would be different because we're talking about the mediums in poetry and the different meters that one uses. This, in some sense, would be playing a similar role, right? If you're used to writing books and writing fiction,
Yes.
now coming into the whole sort of
Screenplay
yeah.
writing and all. Yes, because all these writings, for the layperson, they might not be different from each other, but they are all attempted differently.
Yeah.
It's not like you can be good at all these types of contents. So whenever I also teach creative writing, I'll tell people that, in our field, you can't be jack of all, master of none. You have to be master of something. You have to be so good at something that somebody tells you that, hey, we want to take you for this project or for that project. You can't be doing, hey, I do this also, that also, this also, but I'm very average at everything. Right? So yeah, screenplay writing, I have not done a lot of it. So to get into it would take me time, and I don't want to go into it without being good enough myself, right?
Talking about screenplay and screenwriting, you also watch a lot of films because you talk a lot about that on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Are there some films that you like to recommend for us to watch or something along those lines?
I am a Bollywood buff. I watch
Okay.
a lot of Bollywood movies. So Imtiaz Ali movies and all that. For example, Barfi is one movie that I really love. And I've started watching a lot of OTT movies and small time movies, which are nice. For example, I'm forgetting the names actually, but yes, a lot of OTT films are doing great with Neena Gupta in them. So
Okay.
Neena Gupta is coming in a lot of movies which are like 1 hour, 1.5 hour
Yeah, I
movies.
think yeah.
And those are so amazing with their storyline, right?
I've heard a lot about Panchayat. I haven't seen it. People have
Yes,
told me it's
Panchayat
great.
is amazing. There's also this forgetting the name people, Good Luck.
Okay.
Good
I haven't
Luck is
seen it.
very nice. That is very nice. And Barfi is there. I also watch Jab We Met is very nice. I enjoy Jab We Met.
Classic.
Yes. And there's this one movie. What is that called? Pariniti Chopra and Siddharth.
Oh,
Hasi To Phasi.
Hasi To Phasi.
I think it's a very underrated movie.
Okay.
I really like that movie. Yeah. So,
Fair enough.
good
Nice.
suggestions.
But what is it? What is it? So why is it that I guess you were talking about this earlier when I think it's about the resonation aspect of it only. But what is it about art that sticks on to us in particular society? When if you look at it in practical terms, it may not be as useful as, let's say, engineering or something of that sort.
Yeah.
But still, it's what people talk about in some sense. Why is
Yeah.
that?
I think there can be a few different meanings. Some of them take this as of high value, right? So writers are like high value and reputation and all that. Some of them might think of this writers are intellectuals, right? So from an intellectual point of view, some of them, and I know a lot of people are doing it for simple fame. I'm being honest. And I tell all the, like, if I have batches and students who I'm teaching, I tell them, if you think you are getting into writing to get famous, this is not the easiest path. So don't think that you'll write good stuff and you'll get famous and you'll become Chetan Bhagat in one day. It does not happen like that. And that is a big shocker for them.
Yeah. Great. Those were some of the things I had in mind when we were having this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you. Is there anything you feel that I missed out on and you'd like for our audience to know about?
No, I think this was good. This is like just Kavya being unabashed. I had
It was
a fun
great,
time.
yeah.
It was fun.
Anything else? So, would you like to plug your social media handles where people can find your work, among other things? Yeah.
Yeah,
Any other message?
Yeah, I think you can follow me on Instagram. It's @_Kavya Sharma. I write poetry and I share some stories, and I share a lot of my dog videos and stories there. If you're an animal lover, and yes, apart from that, you can follow Words of Silence. You can visit the website if you're into poetry, storytelling, and you want to submit your work. You can get into www.wordsofsilence.com.
That's great. All right. Thanks for watching once again, guys. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.